The crowd's roar echoed through Madison Square Garden as Taylor Swift stood on stage, bathed in a sea of lights. Her performance on the Midnight's World Tour was flawless, as usual, each note weaving a spell over the packed arena. But behind the scenes, she had been feeling a strange unease she couldn't quite place. After the encore, Taylor retreated to her dressing room, the only sanctuary she had on tour. Her security team lingered outside, ensuring she had the privacy she craved after hours under the public eye. The room smelled faintly of lavender from her diffuser, the soft lighting casting a warm glow over the vanity mirror. She exhaled, pulling her hair back into a loose bun and beginning her nightly ritual of removing her stage makeup. As she leaned closer to the mirror, the steam from her freshly brewed chamomile tea fogged the glass. That's when she saw it. Faint words began to materialize, their jagged lines written in the fog as if by an unseen hand. "You don't know me, but I know you. Be careful who you trust." Taylor froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Her hand instinctively went to her phone, but she stopped herself. Was this a prank? A fan who had somehow snuck in? Her team was meticulous about security. How could this happen? "Everything okay, Miss Swift?" Mitch, her head of security, called from outside the door. She hesitated, her pulse still racing. "Yeah, Mitch, I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. After a long pause, she called him in and pointed to the mirror. Mitch's eyes narrowed as he studied the faint writing. "Could be condensation forming weird patterns," he offered, but Taylor could see the tension in his jaw. He didn't believe that, and neither did she. Mitch radioed his team to sweep the area. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No suspicious activity on the security footage. The mirror itself was wiped clean and checked for tampering. The conclusion? It was probably a prank, someone testing the limits of her security. Still, Taylor couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, she locked her dressing room door and left the lights on as she tried to sleep. But her mind raced with questions. Who could have done this? And why? The tour moved on to Chicago, and Taylor tried to convince herself that the mirror incident was a one-off, a strange fluke in an otherwise seamless routine. But in Chicago, after another electrifying performance, it happened again. This time, the message was more specific. "We met before. You smiled, but it wasn't real." Taylor's stomach churned. She immediately called Mitch into the room. His face hardened as he read the words, his usual calm demeanor slipping. "This isn't random," Mitch said. "Whoever's doing this is following the tour." Once again, the team conducted a thorough investigation, and once again, they found no evidence of tampering. But Taylor knew this wasn't her imagination. Someone was targeting her, someone who knew exactly how to get under her skin. By the time the tour reached Los Angeles, Taylor had grown more anxious. She barely touched her meals and avoided staying in her dressing room longer than necessary. When the message appeared on the mirror that night, it wasn't words but a series of strange symbols, symbols that seemed to taunt her with their cryptic meaning. Taylor's best friend Abigail, who had flown in to support her during the LA shows, studied the symbols closely. "These look like coordinates," Abigail said, pulling out her phone. After a moment of searching, she showed Taylor the screen. The coordinates pointed to a location near Nashville. "Nashville?" Taylor said, her voice shaking. "Why there?" "I don't know," Abigail replied. "But if this person wants you to go there, we need to be careful. It could be a trap." Taylor's mind raced. Nashville was her hometown, the place where she'd started her career. But it was also a place filled with memories and secrets she'd rather not revisit. Mitch was adamantly against investigating the coordinates, insisting it was too dangerous. "We'll have the authorities check it out. You're not going anywhere near this." But Taylor's intuition told her this was personal. Whoever was behind the messages knew her, and they were leading her somewhere for a reason. She wasn't ready to back down. "I need to see this for myself," Taylor said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. Mitch hesitated, then reluctantly agreed. "If we're doing this, we do it my way. Maximum security. You don't take a single step without me." Taylor's private jet touched down in Nashville under the cover of night. The city's familiar skyline rose like a specter against the dark sky, bringing back a rush of memories, some warm, others unsettling. Mitch had arranged for a secure SUV to take them to the coordinates, flanked by 2 cars of security personnel. Abigail sat beside Taylor, her phone clutched tightly in her hand as she reviewed the cryptic symbols one more time. "You sure you're ready for this?" Abigail asked, her voice low. Taylor nodded, but her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. "I have to be. I need to know who's behind this." The coordinates led them to a long abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The building's skeletal frame loomed in the moonlight, its shattered windows resembling hollow eyes. Mitch was the first to exit the SUV, scanning the area with a flashlight, while his team moved in formation around Taylor and Abigail. "Stay close," Mitch ordered, his tone brooking no argument. Taylor felt a chill run down her spine as she stepped inside the warehouse. The air was thick with dust and the faint smell of mildew. The flashlight beams danced over graffiti-covered walls, exposing cobwebs and rusted machinery. And then, in the center of the room, they saw it, a single table with a mirror propped against it. On the mirror, written in the same jagged style as the dressing room messages, were more words. "Welcome home, Taylor. Do you remember what you promised?" Her breath caught. Abigail gripped her arm, whispering, "What promise? What does this mean?" Taylor's lips parted, but no words came. A memory clawed at the edges of her mind, an old one, buried deep. But before she could place it, Mitch called out from the shadows. "Over here!" He was pointing to a folder placed beside the mirror. It was marked with Taylor's initials. Mitch hesitated, glancing at her before opening it. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. They were all of Taylor, spanning years of her career, but taken from angles that made it clear they weren't from paparazzi or fans. These were intimate, candid shots, Taylor at a cafe, backstage at a show, even through the window of her home. "They've been following you for years," Mitch said, his voice grim. Taylor's stomach twisted. "Why? What do they want from me?" The last photo in the stack was different. It showed Taylor as a teenager, her arms around a friend she hadn't thought about in years, Ellie. The drive back to Taylor's childhood home was tense. Ellie had been one of her closest friends growing up, but they'd lost touch after Ellie's family abruptly left town. Taylor hadn't thought much of it at the time. Life had become a whirlwind after her first record deal. But now, with Ellie's face staring back at her, the pieces of the puzzle started to shift. When they arrived at the house, Taylor's parents greeted her with concern. "Is everything okay?" her mother asked, eyeing the security team that flanked her. Taylor didn't answer right away. Instead, she held up the photograph of Ellie. "Do you remember her?" Her father's expression darkened. "Ellie. Yes. You two were inseparable." Her mother's face softened, but there was a shadow in her eyes. "Why are you asking about her now?" "Someone's leaving me messages," Taylor explained, "and they led me to this. I need to know what happened to her." Her parents exchanged a glance, and then her father sighed. Ellie's family left town suddenly because her father got into trouble. Serious trouble. He owed money to dangerous people. Taylor frowned. "What does that have to do with me?" "You were there the night they left," her mother said gently. "Ellie came to you, asking for help. She was desperate, and you promised her you'd always be there for her." Taylor's chest tightened. The memory came flooding back. Ellie, tears streaming down her face, clutching Taylor's hands as she whispered, "Promise me you won't forget me. Promise you'll find me if I ever need you." Taylor had made the promise, meaning every word at the time, but Ellie had disappeared and life had carried Taylor far from Nashville. That night, unable to sleep, Taylor sat in her childhood bedroom, staring at the photograph of her and Ellie. Abigail entered quietly, sitting beside her. "Do you think it's her? Do you think Ellie's the one leaving the messages?" Abigail asked. Taylor shook her head. "I don't know, but if it's not her, then someone else knows about that promise." The next morning, Mitch revealed a new lead. One of his team had tracked down Ellie's last known address, a dilapidated trailer on the edge of town. Against Mitch's advice, Taylor insisted on going there herself. The trailer was empty, but it was clear someone had been living there recently. A mattress lay on the floor, surrounded by scattered belongings. On the cracked wall was another mirror, this one bearing a single word. "Why?" Taylor felt her knees weaken. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to scare her. They were trying to confront her. As Mitch's team swept the area, Taylor noticed a small box tucked under the mattress. She opened it to find a collection of keepsakes, a friendship bracelet she'd given Ellie, old Polaroids of the two of them, and a crumpled letter. The letter was addressed to Taylor, The handwriting was shaky, but it was unmistakably Ellie's. "I waited for you, Taylor. I thought you'd come back, but you never did. Now it's my turn to find you." Taylor's heart shattered. She whispered, "She's been trying to reach me all this time." Taylor sat in her Nashville hotel room, the box of Ellie's keepsakes on the table in front of her. The crumpled letter haunted her. Abigail sat nearby, her phone lighting up occasionally as updates from Mitch's team rolled in. "You should rest," Abigail said gently. "You're running yourself ragged." Taylor shook her head. "I can't. Not until I figure out what happened to Ellie. I broke my promise to her, Abigail. I need to make it right." The next morning, Mitch called with a breakthrough. His team had traced Ellie's movements over the past year. She had been staying in different shelters and working under assumed names. The last solid lead was a charity for at-risk women in Nashville, where Ellie had volunteered briefly before disappearing again. Taylor insisted on visiting the charity in person. The director, a kind-faced woman named Lorraine, greeted them warmly but became cautious when Taylor asked about Ellie. "I remember Ellie," Lorraine said. "She was sweet, but there was a sadness about her. She never shared much, just that she was trying to reconnect with someone from her past. She left a few weeks ago, said she had something important to do." Taylor pressed further. "Did she say where she was going, or who she was trying to find?" Lorraine hesitated, then handed Taylor a small envelope. "She left this behind. I wasn't sure if I should open it, but now, I think it's meant for you." Taylor opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was another letter in Ellie's shaky handwriting. "I never stopped believing you'd come back for me, but it's hard to wait forever. If you're reading this, I want you to know I forgave you a long time ago. I just need you to remember what you promised." Later that night, Taylor sat in the back of the SUV, clutching Ellie's letter. Mitch was driving and Abigail was beside her, scrolling through a map of the city. "Where would she go?" Abigail asked. "If she wanted to meet you but didn't know how to reach you?" Taylor thought for a long moment. Her mind drifted back to the early days of her career, the countless hours spent in Nashville's coffee shops and music venues. One place stood out, a quiet park near the river where she and Ellie used to sit for hours, dreaming about the future. "The riverfront park," Taylor said suddenly. "That's where she'd go." The park was quiet when they arrived. The night was cool, and the only sounds were the rustling leaves and the distant hum of traffic. Mitch's team fanned out, scanning the area with flashlights. Taylor walked ahead, her steps quickening as a strange sense of urgency gripped her. Then she saw it, a figure sitting on a bench near the water, illuminated by the soft glow of a nearby street lamp. Taylor's heart raced as she approached. "Ellie!" The woman turned, and for a moment, Taylor barely recognized her. Ellie's once bright eyes were sunken, her face etched with years of hardship. But when she smiled, Taylor knew it was her. "You came," Ellie said softly, her voice trembling. "I wasn't sure you would." Taylor sat beside her, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Ellie. I didn't remember. I thought you'd moved on." "I waited," Ellie said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to blame you, but it was hard. Every time I saw you on TV, living your dream, I felt forgotten." Taylor reached out, taking Ellie's hand. "You weren't forgotten. I was young, and everything happened so fast, but I never stopped caring about you. I made a promise, and I broke it. I'm here now to make it right." Ellie's shoulders shook as she cried. "I didn't want to scare you. The letters, the photos, I just didn't know how else to reach you. I thought if I reminded you of the past, you'd remember me." The two friends sat together, the weight of years of misunderstanding and pain slowly lifting. Abigail and Mitch kept a respectful distance, watching as Taylor and Ellie reconnected. "I can help you now," Taylor said. "You don't have to struggle anymore. You don't have to be alone." Ellie looked hesitant. "I don't want your pity." "It's not pity," Taylor insisted. "It's love. You were my best friend, Ellie. Let me help." Ellie nodded slowly, and for the first time in years, there was a spark of hope in her eyes. As the night wore on, Taylor made arrangements for Ellie to stay in a safe place and receive the help she needed. But more importantly, she promised they would stay in touch, that this time, she wouldn't disappear from Ellie's life. Abigail watched as Taylor hugged Ellie tightly before walking back to the SUV. "That was brave," Abigail said softly. Taylor smiled through her tears. Number. That was what I should have done years ago. Taylor felt a rare sense of relief as she lay in bed that night. Ellie was safe, and their bond was beginning to heal. Still, something gnawed at her. The letters, the photos, and the eerie reflection in the mirror felt like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit. She needed answers. The following morning, Mitch called with an update. "Taylor, we found something strange. You might want to come to the venue." Taylor, Abigail, and Mitch met at the dressing room where the original letter had appeared. A crime scene team was combing through the room, dusting for prints and analyzing the mirror. A technician approached, holding a small device. "This is a voice recorder," he explained. "We found it hidden behind the frame of the mirror. It's set to activate on motion." The investigator pressed play. At first there was only static, then came a faint, raspy whisper. "You'll never escape what you owe me." Taylor's blood ran cold. Abigail instinctively grabbed her arm. "What does that mean?" The technician continued. "There are multiple recordings, but they all say the same thing. Whoever placed this was trying to scare you." Mitch frowned. "This doesn't feel like Ellie's doing." Taylor nodded, her mind racing. Ellie's letters had been desperate but heartfelt. This recording, however, carried a sinister edge. Ellie, now staying at a secure location, agreed to meet Taylor again. When confronted with the recording, Ellie's reaction was genuine confusion. "I swear I didn't do this," Ellie insisted. "The letters and photos were mine, but that's not me." Taylor believed her, but that only deepened the mystery. "Then who else would want to frighten me? What do they mean by what you owe me?" Ellie looked uncomfortable, glancing down at her hands. "There's one person who might know," she said hesitantly. "Do you remember Richard?" Taylor froze. Richard was a former manager from her early career, a controlling and manipulative man who had been fired after rumors surfaced of him exploiting young clients. Taylor had avoided thinking about him for years. Ellie continued. "Before you made it big, Richard kept saying you owed him for creating your career. When I tried to stand up to him, he got scary. He threatened me, Taylor. That's why I left so suddenly." A chill crept over Taylor. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried," Ellie said, her voice breaking. "But you were already caught up in everything. I didn't think you'd believe me." That night, Taylor and Mitch began investigating Richard. They uncovered a troubling history, multiple lawsuits, all quietly settled out of court, and allegations of harassment from former clients. More disturbing, he had been spotted in cities where Taylor had performed over the past year. Mitch tapped a file on his laptop. He's been off the radar for months, but if he's the one behind this, he's gone to extreme lengths. Taylor's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "The price of fame always comes due. Don't forget your debt." The next day, Taylor attended her sound check with a heightened sense of awareness. As she sang, she noticed a man lingering in the shadows of the arena. He wore a baseball cap and dark glasses, but something about his posture struck her as familiar. After the session, she alerted Mitch, who reviewed security footage. The man had avoided the camera's angles intentionally, but one frame caught a partial shot of his face. Mitch's team enhanced the image, and there was no mistaking it. Richard. "This confirms he's stalking you," Mitch said. "We need to report this immediately." Taylor nodded, but a simmering anger replaced her fear. "He's been hiding in the shadows for too long. It's time we confront him." Mitch coordinated with local authorities, setting a trap at Taylor's next performance. Security teams monitored every corner of the venue, while Taylor performed with the same passion that had built her career. Near the end of the show, a commotion erupted backstage. Richard had been spotted trying to slip into the restricted area. He was swiftly apprehended, and as the security team restrained him, he yelled, "She wouldn't be who she is without me. She owes me everything." In the days following Richard's arrest, investigators discovered evidence connecting him to the recordings and hidden letters. He had been following Taylor for years, waiting for the right moment to exact revenge for perceived slights. But his plan had failed, exposing him as a bitter man grasping at power he no longer held. Ellie, meanwhile, found a new sense of peace knowing the person who had driven her away was finally facing justice. Taylor, too, felt a weight lift, though the ordeal left her shaken. As the story spread, Taylor used the platform to speak out about the dangers of unchecked power in the entertainment industry, advocating for better protections for young artists. Ellie stood by her side, their friendship stronger than ever. In the weeks following Richard's arrest, the story of Taylor's ordeal and Ellie's return spread through the media like wildfire. Fans rallied behind Taylor, showering her with messages of support, while industry insiders expressed shock at the extent of Richard's actions. But for Taylor, the real victory wasn't just in exposing Richard, it was in reclaiming her sense of safety and rebuilding her connection with Ellie. Taylor invited Ellie to move in temporarily while she sorted out her life. Their shared time became a balm for both of them. Late-night conversations helped them process the emotional wounds Richard's actions had inflicted. "I always thought leaving was the right thing," Ellie admitted one evening, her voice tinged with regret. "But now I see I should have fought harder to protect you." Taylor placed a reassuring hand on Ellie's. "You did what you had to do, and I understand that now. If anything, I should have seen the warning signs. But we're here now, and that's what matters." As Taylor resumed her tour, she made an announcement that surprised fans. At her next concert, she introduced Ellie to the crowd. "This is Ellie," she said, her voice full of emotion. "She's been my friend, my sister, and my anchor long before any of this. I wouldn't be where I am without her." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers a powerful testament to the healing power of relationships. Ellie, visibly moved, waved shyly. It was a moment neither of them would forget. Meanwhile, the investigation into Richard continued. Authorities discovered evidence of his stalking that went back years, including photographs, emails, and even a journal outlining his twisted plans. His trial became a public reckoning, with several other victims coming forward to share their stories. Taylor used her platform to amplify their voices, highlighting the need for systemic change in the industry. Through it all, Taylor's music took on new depth. Songs inspired by the ordeal began to emerge, weaving themes of resilience, justice, and forgiveness. One track, titled Reflections, became a standout hit, resonating with fans who saw it as a powerful anthem against manipulation and fear. Ellie found her own way to heal. She started working with an organization that supported former assistants and employees in the entertainment industry, advocating for better protections and mental health resources. Her work became her passion, and she often credited Taylor for inspiring her to take those steps. "You stood up for yourself," she told Taylor one evening, "and now, because of you, I feel like I can stand up for others." The creepy letters, the recordings, and the terrifying moments became a memory that no longer held power over Taylor. They were a chapter in her story, one of fear, yes, but also of triumph and unity. As Taylor wrapped up her tour, she and Ellie stood on the balcony of her Nashville home, watching the sun set. The horizon glowed with shades of gold and pink, a reminder that even after the darkest nights, light could always return. "We made it through," Ellie said, her voice steady. Taylor smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "We did, and we'll keep making it through, together." The two women clinked their coffee mugs in a quiet toast, their bond unbreakable. The creepy letters and the man who had tried to frighten them were now firmly in the past. What remained was the undeniable strength they had rediscovered, not just in themselves, but in each other. The story ended not with a sense of fear, but with a celebration of resilience, justice, and the power of true friendship.